In this episode, we move from naming AI risks to reducing them in a way that actually holds up in the real world, especially when beginners are the ones interacting with the system every day. Security is not only about stopping attackers, it is also about preventing accidents, misunderstandings, and slow drift toward unsafe habits. AI tools are particularly good at creating that drift because they feel friendly, they respond quickly, and they often sound confident even when they are uncertain. That combination can make people hand over information too casually, accept answers too readily, and treat the model like an authority instead of a tool. Risk reduction is the discipline of building boundaries that keep the benefits while limiting the harm, and for AI adoption, those boundaries often come down to 5 practical areas. Guardrails that shape behavior, data loss prevention, DLP, that protects information, permissions that control access, disclosure that sets expectations and legal clarity, and defenses against overreliance that keep humans thinking. If you can understand these areas and how they reinforce each other, you can reason about secure AI usage without needing to be an expert in machine learning. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Guardrails are the set of rules and design choices that constrain what the AI system can do, what it can say, and what it can access. A common beginner assumption is that a guardrail is just a polite refusal message, but strong guardrails start earlier and go deeper. They include input boundaries, such as rejecting obviously dangerous or sensitive requests, and output boundaries, such as preventing the system from returning certain categories of information. They also include workflow boundaries, such as requiring additional checks for actions that affect accounts, money, or security settings. Guardrails can be technical, like policy enforcement in the application layer, and they can be procedural, like human review for sensitive use cases. The main idea is that you are not trusting the model to always make the right call in the moment. You are shaping the environment so the model is less likely to be placed in a position where a single mistake becomes a major incident. A useful way to think about guardrails is to separate what the model generates from what the system accepts as an action or a truth. A model can generate language, but the system should decide what is allowed, and those are not the same thing. For example, if a model suggests that a user should reset a password, the system should still require the user to pass identity verification before anything changes. If the model summarizes a policy, the system should treat that summary as a convenience, not as the authoritative policy text. In more advanced setups, guardrails can also include constrained tool use, where the model can request actions but cannot execute them without validation. This reduces risk because it breaks the direct path from manipulated text to real-world impact. Even for beginners, this is an important mindset. Guardrails are about preventing the model's words from automatically becoming the system's decisions. Data loss prevention, DLP, is about reducing the chance that sensitive information leaks out of where it belongs. In AI adoption, leakage can happen in several directions. Users can leak data into the model. The model can leak data back to users who should not see it, or data can leak through logs and storage that were never intended to hold sensitive content. DLP is not a single product. It is a strategy that combines classification, detection, and enforcement. You decide what counts as sensitive, like customer identifiers, financial records, health data, or proprietary designs. You then detect when that data is being moved into risky places, such as being pasted into prompts or included in generated outputs. Finally, you enforce rules, such as blocking, masking, or requiring approval. The security goal is not only to stop obvious theft, but to prevent casual mistakes, like someone pasting a confidential report into an AI tool because they want a quick summary. One of the trickiest parts of DLP in AI contexts is that text can be transformed, paraphrased, or fragmented, which makes detection harder. A user might paste only part of a sensitive document, thinking it is harmless, but small fragments can still be sensitive. A model might summarize data in a way that still reveals what matters, even if it does not copy exact lines. That is why DLP for AI often uses multiple layers. rule-based detection for known patterns, classification tags on documents and messages, and policies that restrict what kinds of data are allowed in certain workflows. Even if the detection is imperfect, layered controls can still dramatically reduce risk. A beginner-friendly takeaway is that prevention is better than cleanup because once sensitive data has been shared widely or stored in the wrong place, you cannot easily undo it. DLP is the part of the system that tries to keep those mistakes from happening in the first place. Permissions are the backbone of safe AI adoption because they control who can see what and who can do what, regardless of how clever the model is. If an AI assistant can access internal knowledge, it must not become a shortcut around established access rules. The model should not be able to reveal a document to someone who does not already have permission to view it. That seems obvious, but it is easy to violate accidentally if the system retrieves content broadly and then uses it to answer questions. Good permission design treats the model as acting on behalf of the user, which means the model inherits the user's limitations, not the system's maximum capability. If a user cannot access a set of records through normal tools, the AI assistant must not be able to access them either. This is one of the most important security ideas for beginners. Convenience cannot become a backdoor. Permissions also matter for actions, not just data. If the AI tool can initiate requests like creating a ticket, updating a profile, or triggering a workflow, then those actions need access checks and audit trails. The model should not be allowed to perform high-impact actions using broad service credentials that bypass normal accountability. Instead, actions should be attributed to an individual identity, and sensitive actions should require stronger verification. This is how you avoid a situation where someone uses clever phrasing to get the AI tool to do something harmful, and then no one can tell who was responsible. Permissions also help contain damage if an account is compromised, because a compromised account with limited rights can do less harm than a compromised account with sweeping access. For AI adoption, permissions are your way of turning a powerful tool into a controlled tool. Disclosure is the idea that users should understand what the system is, what it is not, and how information is handled. This is partly about trust and partly about legal and ethical clarity. If people do not know whether their prompts are stored, reviewed, or used for improvement, they cannot make responsible choices about what to share. If people do not know whether outputs are verified, they may assume the system is authoritative. Disclosure can include simple explanations of data handling, acceptable use, limitations, and whether content may be monitored for security. It can also include transparency about where the model's answers come from, especially when the system uses internal sources. The goal is not to overwhelm users with fine print, but to set expectations so people do not accidentally turn normal use into a security incident. For beginners, this reinforces a healthy skepticism. The system is helpful, but it is not a certified expert, and it is not a private diary. Disclosure also plays a role in incident response and accountability, because clear rules make it easier to detect and correct unsafe behavior. If you define what data is not allowed to be shared, you can build enforcement around that rule, and you can train users consistently. If you define that outputs must be reviewed before being used in customer-facing or security-critical contexts, you reduce the chance that a model's mistake becomes a public problem. Disclosure also reduces social engineering risk, because attackers often exploit ambiguity. If users know that the AI assistant will never ask for credentials or sensitive personal information, then a message that tries to coax that data stands out. In other words, disclosure is not only about compliance. It is also a practical security control that makes people harder to trick. Clear expectations create predictable behavior, and predictable behavior is easier to secure. Overreliance traps are the risks that come from treating the model's output as a substitute for thinking, verification, and human judgment. This is not a moral criticism of users. It is a realistic consequence of how humans react to confident language. People are busy, and a plausible answer can feel like a solved problem, especially if it is delivered in a calm and organized way. Overreliance becomes especially dangerous when the topic involves security decisions, legal choices, medical decisions, or anything where errors have serious consequences. It can also be dangerous in technical contexts where small details matter, because an AI system might provide a convincing explanation that is subtly wrong. Overreliance can even create a feedback loop where people stop learning, and then they cannot tell when an answer is incorrect. The security risk is that a model's confident mistake can lead to unsafe actions, and the organization may not notice until harm occurs. Reducing over-reliance means designing the system and the culture so verification is normal, not exceptional. One approach is to require citations to internal sources when the system answers questions based on internal documents, so users can check the source material. Another approach is to label outputs clearly as generated assistance rather than authoritative decisions, especially for high-stakes topics. You can also build workflows that encourage confirmation, such as prompting users to validate key facts before proceeding. In security-sensitive contexts, you can require human review, not because humans are perfect, but because a second set of eyes catches different mistakes. Training plays a role too, because users need to know that models can hallucinate, meaning they can produce statements that sound reasonable but are not grounded in real data. When verification becomes a habit, the model becomes safer to use because its mistakes are less likely to pass silently into production decisions. Guardrails, DLP, permissions, disclosure, and anti-over-reliance measures are strongest when they work together rather than acting as isolated fixes. Guardrails reduce what the model is allowed to attempt. Permissions reduce what the model is allowed to access and do on behalf of a user. DLP reduces accidental and intentional leakage of sensitive data through prompts, outputs, and storage. Disclosure reduces confusion and creates consistent user behavior. Anti-over-reliance measures reduce the chance that a convincing but wrong answer becomes an action. If you rely on only one of these, you get brittle security, like locking the front door while leaving the windows open. When you combine them, you get layered defense, where one control catches what another misses. That layered approach is especially important in AI adoption because the system interacts with humans in a natural language channel, and natural language is messy and creative in ways that attackers love. A beginner-friendly way to evaluate whether these controls are working is to ask a few practical questions about everyday use. Can a user with low privileges get the assistant to reveal information they should not see, even by asking indirectly or by using clever wording? Can a user paste sensitive information into the prompt without any warning or blocking? And if they can, does it get stored somewhere it should not? Are the model's answers presented as if they are guaranteed, or are users nudged toward checking sources and confirming decisions? If the model is asked to do something high impact, does the system require stronger verification and leave an audit trail? These questions are not about having fancy features. They are about whether the system behaves safely when normal people use it in normal ways. If you can answer these questions confidently, you are reducing AI risk in a way that survives real usage rather than only looking good in a demo. One of the biggest mistakes organizations make is to treat AI security as a one-time setup, like installing a lock and then never checking it again. In reality, behavior changes over time, new features are added, and attackers adapt quickly to what works. Guardrails need updating as you learn how people use the system and how attackers test it. DLP policies need tuning so they catch what matters without blocking normal work unnecessarily. Permissions need ongoing cleanup because access tends to accumulate unless you actively manage it. Disclosure needs to stay aligned with what the system actually does, not what it used to do months ago. And over-reliance risks increase when the tool becomes familiar, because familiarity can turn caution into habit. Sustained risk reduction comes from treating AI adoption as an ongoing security program, with feedback, monitoring, and continuous improvement. When you put all of this together, the secure path to adopting AI is not to ban it out of fear and not to embrace it blindly out of excitement. The secure path is to recognize that AI is a high-leverage tool that needs boundaries, just like powerful access to networks or sensitive databases. Guardrails keep the model in a safe lane. DLP keeps sensitive data from leaking, permissions keep access aligned with identity, disclosure keeps expectations honest, and anti-over-reliance design keeps humans engaged and accountable. If you build those layers early, you do not have to depend on perfect behavior from the model or perfect judgment from every user. Instead, you create a system where mistakes and manipulation are expected and contained. That is the core security mindset you want as a SecurityX student. Design for the real world, and then let your controls do the quiet, continuous work of keeping risk manageable.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.